What if your comfort zone is actually holding back your funding success? In this episode, I'm going to explore with you what it really takes to break through in business, in mindset, and in the venture world. Today, I'm joined by Emily Dinu, founder and CEO of Numinous Capital, for a conversation that took me to some unexpected places. We talked practical, what it really takes to prepare for venture funding, why you might want venture funding, but we also talked about the charisma and how charisma alone won't get a founder funding, how to reverse engineer your startup's path to exit, and what VCs are actually looking for in transformational companies, especially in certain and fast evolving markets that we're experiencing today. This conversation, it was so powerful, it went beyond funding advice. It was Emily's honest perspective on mindset, grit, and the self-leadership that it takes to thrive. And she's experienced this herself, and obviously this is what she looks for when she's investing. We talk about building out of constraint, taking bold action even when you're scared, and how comfort can be the enemy of growth. If you're an entrepreneur in the making, a leader, or someone navigating big career leaps, this episode holds so much goodness for you. If you are really intrigued about being an entrepreneur, the first half is your jam, but the second half, well, that's for everybody. So without further ado, let's dive on in. Welcome to the show, Emily. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Tony. Nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
I'm so excited to dive into this because this is a topic that resonates so deeply with so many of the women I talk to. And I've had a few people coming on and talking about venture funding, investment from the angle of being a startup. And I know that you've got a lot to offer in this space. So I want to start off with, how do you become a business owner, someone who's building and investing in companies? How did you get going in this space in the first place?
Yeah. It's been a long and windy and happy road by design. I think there are a number of ways to get into venture specifically, and something that we say in the industry is that path to venture. And typically that looks like, you'll get an MBA and some internships and join the pipeline there. I got into venture to support entrepreneurs because I'm truly an entrepreneur at heart. I was raised by an entrepreneurial mother. We ran businesses together, and I ramped up my first, actual business when I was 19, operating other people's businesses for them. And then funds and family offices came from there. So I find the way that capital moves to be interesting, but most of all, investing in entrepreneurs that are building a future that is good for everyone. So that's sort of the short version. There was a lot in between. I was, as I mentioned, raised by a single mother, and we learned how to build out of constraint. Just on pure grit, because we didn't have wealth or connections. And I truly believe that entrepreneurship can change lives. And I'm a huge advocate for everyone having at least a small business that they run. So I'll pause there. That's sort of the genesis of venture for me. It's all in supporting entrepreneurs and creating a bright future.
That's actually precisely why I wanted to bring you on the show, because supporting entrepreneurs is something I'm deeply passionate about. So many of the leaders that come and work with me, they come to me because of leadership. There's a deeper frustration of wanting to do their own thing and not knowing how to get going. And when do you approach somebody like you for funding? What does that even look like? And that's what I want to dig into today. But before we do that, you mentioned something really important there in passing. You mentioned grit. I don't often like using the word grit, but I was actually having a conversation just this morning with my husband about the power of grit, pushing through, getting stuff done. And what it does actually for our mental health and our long-term old age resilience is the conversation I was having this morning. We know that grit correlates, we don't know why, but it correlates with staving off things like Alzheimer's. Where does your grit come from? It's not common. Let's go with common, shall we? I think it's often normal in the women I work with, but I don't think it's common in the population. What is grit? Where does it come from? Why do you have it?
So grit to me came out of necessity. Obviously, growing up with very little, and I don't want to harbor on that point too much, but it was really tough growing up. I didn't have clothes of my own. We didn't really have food. We didn't have a house for a little bit. For me, grit is sort of how I deal and play with life and challenge myself and prove to myself that um, yeah, I can do anything. I can do anything. The more I put myself out there, the more that I persevere, the better I become. And I think we tend to hide around behind unfortunate circumstances or things that we think are wrong about us too frequently. Um, but when you don't have an option other than to be gritty and resilient, that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
all you know. So it's so deeply, entwined and into my being that it's hard to describe myself without grit, I guess. Um, so it comes out of self care too. If you really care about yourself, I think it, you want yourself to succeed, and that requires a certain level of grit, perseverance, confidence, and faith in the future, and excitement in the challenge of life and this adventure that we have.
Yeah, I love that you frame it as a form of self-care actually, because I do think it is. But I think in the moment it's very hard to see it that way. But in the same way, exercise is a form of self-care. And if you're anything like me, I don't like exercise, but we do it anyway. Sometimes self-care is doing the hard things. And I do view grit, the amount I get from doing something hard and getting across the finish line or changing something in some fundamental way because of the determination I threw at it.
Yeah.
And it was hard in the moment, but I get so much from it. It is a sort of a form of self-care. I really agree with that. Well, let's get back on track. Let's talk about what investing looks like. What do we mean by that? So let's start off with what you do. You are the CEO and founder of Numinous Capital, which is seriously awesome to be a CEO, founder of an investment firm. What is your vision for investing? Why did you start investing? Why is this important to you? And what are you trying to achieve with Numinous?
Yeah. Yeah. So I love investing. I love investing in startups and other alternatives. I just find it fascinating. So there is a fascination with the math and returns and trying to calculate and predict the future and everything like that. But for me, being an operator of other people's businesses, small businesses, startups, and funds and family offices, I have an operator's background. And my work ethic is such that I'm so excited for a fund to function very well because that tends to benefit the entrepreneurs, the investors, and the fund itself. So there's that, an excitement around operating my own fund for the first time. But two, I was experiencing and picking up on a number of gaps in the venture capital space, both in how we assess founders and how we invest. I think on the founder side, we kind of hang a little bit too much on charisma, and
Yeah,
I
we do.
find, yeah, that the smartest people aren't always the most charismatic, though. Maybe it takes a little bit more time to, um, you know, get out of them what they're trying to communicate, but they're brilliant. So, I want to be there for those founders. And then in the type of investing, it's just, 90% of every venture portfolio fails. It goes to zero. And we don't also talk about quantifying what a break even is too over something where we're making returns. So, yeah, I'm just not into investing in trends. I have a firm belief that we should invest in things that really make a difference in people's lives. So not only software, B2B software and consumer apps. And so much capital is being poured into software and apps that are, just for businesses or just for customer experiences. But there's not enough money going into science and scientific startups and infrastructure and true health solutions. So that's what we're doing at Numinous. Takes a little bit of, you got to work with the numbers a little bit because these companies cost more to fund and take a longer amount of time typically to exit. But someone has to do it, and I'm happy to.
Yeah, I love that this is more about the fact that you want to do something important than making a quick buck. As you say, like everybody's investing in B2B software, in customer success software, stuff like that. I mean, I don't know if you're not investing in software, but I think I always talk to clients, the number of my clients who are techies, who are saying to me, I really want to create a startup that is doing something for the human race, doing something for the world good, doing something for climate change, doing something for this, doing something. And it's about the difference we're making, even if they're coming at it from a software background or a tech background or whatever the background is. A lot of the people I work with are very technical, but be very easy to like just dump them in the bucket of like, and I have no problem with people building startups around customer success. Hey, I've bought my own fair share of customer success software over the years. There is a place for that. But when we aren't investing in these things that make the world a better place, it's good to have people like you who go, you know what, like it's just too important to me to not do this. So the other phrase you used to me before we hit record is that you invest in what's inevitable rather than following the momentum. What do you mean by inevitable in that context?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the most fun parts of being a venture investor is sort of to try to predict the future and what we'll need as a human race in the future. So things like, aging populations, infrastructure decay, these are all things we can sort of predict, right? So if a company's inevitable, it serves an actual need, either a need that we have now or in the future or some combination of both. So rather than something more recreational, I prefer to invest in things that people either need or will need later on down the line. And that's so exciting. It's so exciting. And, you mentioned not making a buck either. That's not the main motivation here. But if you really think about it, the markets for these types of companies are huge.
Yeah,
so it actually
they never go
makes
away.
much more financial sense for investors to, focus on investments that are, not just SaaS, not just software that you can use in your company. So it's slightly less scalable, but it makes sense from a financial sense. And also it meets actual needs, which I feel like we should want to do.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, we should be meeting needs and we should be aiming to do something that makes a difference. Maybe that's just like me and my little on my little pedestal, but I definitely think we should be here to make a difference, whatever that looks like. So let's talk about what it takes to get investment. So you mentioned that it take a long time to evaluate startups. You look at the core science, the fundamental value. So what is it that an entrepreneur listening, a leader who's thinking, oh, could I do this? Is startup funding their thing for me? What is it that you look for? What advice would you give to someone looking to raise investment or considering if investment's the way forward? What is going to get them traction?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the choice between, utilizing venture or angel dollars or not, I don't think every company needs to do that. I think there are ways for companies to scale otherwise, but we've glamorized venture capital in the whole startup game. But I guess one piece of advice would be to work backward. If you're looking for venture capital, your company will either have to be acquired or IPO'd, ideally within 7 years at the end of the fund. So you sort of have to work backward. What does an exit look like for you? Is an exit in your future, or do you sort of want to continue, not necessarily not scaling, but maintaining the business later on, 5 to 7 years down the line? You really have to work backward and see if funding's right for you. But big, juicy markets are always a good place to start. So really deciding or investigating whether or not your solution is super niche, which isn't terrible because there are ways to converge ideas with other entrepreneurs or create more of a platform play. Or if it addresses like a big juicy market, that's what we talk about. So that those at least $1 billion markets, but truly we're looking in the trillions. So it's big market, know your numbers, know exactly how to articulate the problem that you're solving in one sentence. That's also a skill that not many entrepreneurs have nailed.
Oh yeah.
And honestly, just get out there. If you think venture is right for you, and you have, even at the earliest stages, some sort of prototype, start pitching, start talking to venture investors and other startups, and kind of gauge whether or not it's a good fit for you, and also take in feedback like a sponge.
I think you mentioned something that I don't think I've ever heard somebody else mention before on this show, even though I've had quite a lot of people who are either investors or work within the investment world, which is, it doesn't surprise me, but I've never had anybody actually come out and say it, which is you need a plan for an exit within 7 years.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure most people thinking about venture funding are actually thinking that. I think a lot of people come to startups, especially the first time. I think serial startup entrepreneurs, I think it's different, but I think most people become startup entrepreneurs, certainly later in life, because they have a passion for the thing they want to create. I think the serial entrepreneurs, I think it's different. And, there's an attitude of like scale and sell or scale and IPO. So it's really interesting to hear you say that. Is that true? It doesn't surprise me, but is it true across the entire investment industry? Like that 7 years is a key point.
Yeah. So that 7 years represents sort of the lifetime of a typical venture fund, right? So venture firms will raise a number of funds and invest in a certain amount of companies per fund. So the expectation is by the end of year 7, all of those companies originally invested in either, they fail, they call it quits, they don't keep, they're not zombies. That's sort of a term that we use where, you'll have a company that's operational and maybe even, making some modest revenue, but nowhere near exit. So those are zombie. So it's more of a function of fund economics and fund administration than anything else. That's the lifetime of a venture fund typically. And actually what we're seeing now in the secondaries market, where funds are selling off their positions to a completely different, type of thing, which sort of restarts the clock on those investments. The unfortunate thing is they're losing a lot of value because the companies are running out of time to exit. So I should mention there are a couple different models for venture investing, and that's one thing that we do at Numinous. We combine both venture and patient capital. And the advantage of patient capital is that there's a longer timeline to exit that brings it up to 11 years. So that gives these types of companies that aren't super scalable software enough time to actually grow, mature, and win, rather than, the expectation to start from scratch at something with maybe some hard tech component, or again, science takes a long time to de-risk and validate. It gives everyone a little bit more breathing room too. And then the advantage for me is our fund gets to capture that value. We're not forced to sell off our positions in companies after 7 years. So
yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I want to discuss with you before we move on to some other topics I've got lined up is how you are approaching investment, because I think it's really useful to know from the other side, like the entrepreneurs listening, like what is it that how do you make decisions? And I know one of the conversations we've had is big checks versus smaller checks versus follow-on funding. How do you approach that? I know that you were making some decisions actually last time we spoke. Have you made any decisions, or is this going to be on a case-by-case basis? What is involved in that from your side that will help the entrepreneurs listening understand what to expect in the conversations with people like you?
the way that I approach this is how much do I believe in the founder truly? So the company is one thing, the idea is one thing, traction's one thing too, which is a positive. If there's some actual commercial traction, I need to believe that the founder can execute and iterate super quickly. If I have that gut and I believe that founder is extraordinary, I'm happy to lead the round and go in with a big check. And I think we were sort of alluding to conversation, whether or not we just go all in at the beginning or reserve some to, just to sort of see how these companies function after their funding. So I where we're at right now is not a modest first check, but not all in at once. I want some time to validate that the founder is able to actually execute as an entrepreneur. I think investing in early stage, it's a blast because there's so many possibilities, but there's a lot of ambiguity. You don't really know unless you know. And the only way to do that, which is why it's risky, is to fund these companies and, support them as much as you can. But it's kind of a wait and see type of thing.
Yeah.
So for me, it makes a lot more sense to our investors to hold back and do a follow-on round or a subsequent round later on. But yeah, it for me, it's fully founder focused. And again, like market sentiments and everything like that too matter. But it's all about the entrepreneur, truly.
Yeah, it is. I think the actual individual is so powerful. Like I worked with a sales company a couple of years ago, and the sales company said to me, like, it doesn't matter how good your team is at selling if you can't sell as a CEO founder. And I thought that was so true. You don't have to be the most charismatic person, but as a CEO founder, one of your founders needs to be able to convince people that this product is worth buying. That doesn't mean they're a great salesperson, doesn't mean they're really eloquent. It means that they have the passion and can get that across. And that is not the same thing as charisma. It helps if you're charismatic, but you need a founder to do that. And I don't think most people appreciate that. It really took me having a sales company pointing that out to me, that I had to be able to sell before I could hire a team to sell for me. And I've never been comfortable. I'm now quite comfortable selling. I've realized it's a service to sell. Like selling myself, I'm here to change the world. And when I find a woman who can benefit from what I do, it's a service. And getting into that mindset rather than the car salesperson mindset, right? Like, oh, sales is all about, the icky stuff, really changed things for me. And I think anybody listening needs to understand that about a founder. Like if you want to be a founder, you or a co-founder need to be not comfortable selling, because I don't think that comes straight out of the gate, but you need to be okay with you're going to be responsible for bringing in the first dollars in your company.
Absolutely. That's so important. And I don't want to hijack the conversation, but I know your background in physics. So you sort of understand how the PhD mind works.
Yeah. It's a strange mind.
It is, but it's great. So we look at a lot of university spin outs. And I think when people hear this, they think, young people creating companies, but typically it's PIs and researchers that are spinning out companies. And one of my greatest pleasures recently was coaching a set of founders from university startups to articulate what they do in a way that matters to people rather than go directly into the technicals. Right?
Oh, I love that. Yes.
Yeah.
We need more people like doing that kind of work with founders. We really do.
Yeah. And, they were so receptive to it. It was like no one had ever told them that before. So I think, when we're creating things, we default to, the weeds, right? We try to explain those things, but if you can articulate the vision, you're golden. Absolutely. Get me on your team through conversation and let me feel your passion. That's so important. Yes.
Yeah. That's so key. Get the person listening to you on your side, on your team. Get them being the advocate for you. If you've done that, you've won the game, in my opinion. Okay, we are kind of running out of time, but I want to do a 180 with you, because one of the things that blew my mind when we first met was your mindset. And so I know we've been talking about entrepreneurship and investments, but I think part of success, any form of success, is our mindset. So I know we're kind of running out of time, but I do want to spend a few minutes before we wrap up talking about the mindset of success. Let's start off with, how has your mindset shaped your approach to what you do, to being a CEO founder, to taking risks, to experimentation? How has your mindset got you there? What mindset is necessary? Maybe is another way of putting it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's sort of like the, feel scared and do it anyway. There's that saying, for me, the conversation that you were alluding to was talking about how feeling comfortable is actually it's a false comfort. We get lost and abandon ourselves in things that we think are comfortable. My mindset's more, it's indexed to something more positive, where I don't really see any circumstances bad anymore. I'm good with life. I'm happy with the way things work out no matter what. And I think, when you approach life that way, it tends to open up for you, because you're finding things to see, rather than blinding yourself with fear or hesitation. So I'm definitely action oriented all the time. I'm not someone that likes to stand still for too long. I don't linger in comfort too often. And I will say, one thing that I'm working on now is trying to soften that. So I'm not constantly bracing for impact as well, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But even if it did, I would be absolutely okay. So I think mindset is crucial. Adjusting your mindset to work in your favor through your beliefs, which is really sort of how our brains operate. So pick and choose your own beliefs about your circumstances and yourself and your life and how things have gone and will go. And that's sort of a life hack. I say that's how I bend reality, is in that way. So we've all heard this. I just feel like we don't internalize it literally, because it almost works like magic. It's worth a shot. For your listeners, I would say, again, pick and choose your beliefs to your benefit, truly. Not to harm anyone, be good about it, but the beliefs about how you see your life and how you see things going for yourself. Tune yourself up, tune your software up here. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think I love the way you phrase that, pick and choose your beliefs to your benefit, because I think that is the epitome of for anybody who's read it, the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. She's somebody who studies the art of mindset and how you think about yourself can change how successful you are. It can change your IQ, changes how you show up to tests and exams and stuff like this. And that's phenomenal to me, because most people don't think that you can choose your own beliefs, but it's a belief. It's a belief, listeners. You get to choose by definition. And I think that is very underrated. The other thing I just want to call out here is this comfort thing. I have a mantra of get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because discomfort is where we're growing. And I know with myself that when I'm comfortable, I get bored so quickly. I love to grow. I love to find things. Every day should be just a little bit uncomfortable. I don't have to go out my way to sit on a bed of nails, or the mental equivalent thereof. But every day I try, except when I'm sick or something like that, like it's been a really hard day personally, and maybe that's discomfort in its own right though. But I will try and do something that's out of my comfort zone, because that is where I'm learning. That is where I'm stretching. And I wasn't put on this earth to just stay still. I've got too much to do. I think you're the same. Right?
Oh, yeah. I get so restless. And I think too, if you're really participating in life, you don't want to sit still. And I also say, I don't think at this point in my life, I don't think that life is supposed to be comfortable either. I think it's actually supposed to be a little bit uncomfortable, at least once a day, right? Like the whole point is to grow, to realize our own potential, or heck, I don't know what the point is, but this seems to be working well for me.
I think, the human condition is change, is development, is growth, whatever form of growth. I mean, there's a potential issue with growth in terms of what we're doing to the planet, but I think human growth is an intellectual growth, knowledge growth, curiosity, maybe it's curiosity, that is the success of our species. So although we're hardwired for comfort, because comfort means we use fewer calories, we don't have to do anything, which is, reserving our, what we've got as a species. At the same time, we've excelled as a species because we're curious, because we're nosy, because we do things that nobody's done before. That's how we've got to the point we are today as a species. Take it or leave it. But so I think it is human nature. And it's kind of an interesting one, because we're in a particular place now where our lives are so comfortable unless we try to make them uncomfortable.
Right.
I think maybe it's only in the last 50 years where most of the human race has been in this privileged position of comfort a lot of the time. And we only go into discomfort out of choice. Obviously, there's lots of hardships out there. I'm not belittling that. But a lot of us, especially those of us listening who've probably had jobs a lot of the time, we've only gone into discomfort out of choice in our professional lives. And I think that speaks to something. We have to choose it now. Yeah.
Yeah. What an interesting, goodness.
I love going down these segues
here. That's, I hadn't really, obviously with things being automated and conveniences being more at reach to most people, I'm not going to say everyone. Yeah, absolutely. In the past 50 years, where we have to seek out uncomfortable situations. But the cool thing about that is that before all that happened, the discomfort came from things that we now don't have to worry about. So this gives us a lot more room to keep raising the bar.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. As as humanity and everything like that. And if we all try, if all of us are doing that, just think about where we're going to end up. I think where we are right now with like the comfort, and I think, pointing fingers constantly. I think it's also, take responsibility for yourself, do something, push yourself, experiment with an idea. That I'm such a big advocate for everyone, like I said, being an entrepreneur, just because there's such a personal journey that goes into running a company that's meaningful to you. So many opportunities for growth.
I just want to poke on that thread one more time, because you mentioned there about, there are, pointing fingers as a case in point. There's a lot in the world right now, which I will admit I just avoid. The world is full of pointy fingers. The internet's full of that. I actually think a lot of the conflict going on is an extreme version of that, right? Put all that to one side. I think the privileged position that we're in, and maybe, and I have to be very careful with our current politics to use the word privilege, because we do have a duty of care to the human race as well, I think. But we have the opportunity to choose where we get uncomfortable. And I think a lot of us are choosing pointy fingers as a version of discomfort, and it is not moving the needle for the species at all. It's dragging us backwards. We're moving back into the 20th century. If we actually chose to get uncomfortable in a way that moved the human race forward, God, can you imagine what we'd achieve? It'd be extraordinary.
Yeah, absolutely.
And more of us need to lean into that rather than the pointy finger version.
I'm so glad that you said that. I agree. I really think, having some purpose, restoring, maybe working on one big project together, country by country. I think things like that would be fantastic. But people don't understand how rattled and how draining being emotional all the time is. And I think if we were able to put some of that aside and think critically and also creatively, everyone's so brilliant. I've never met one person that I haven't been able to identify, something.
Yes, right.
Crazy, what if we focus on that instead? What if we, not only saw that in other people, but let's start with us. Like, let's look at ourselves and, what can we contribute meaningfully? Right. These are also questions that,
I love this so much. I didn't expect to go here today, but I'm so glad we did. I thought we were talking about investment and a lot of mindset, but I love this. That's why I love my podcast so much, because I get to meet brilliant people just like you and have these fascinating segues into things that are really important. Because you're spot on that the emotional cost of being the person. And, my husband's the first person to call me out when I get all riled up about what's going on in the world. Yeah. And he's like, well, you're not going to change anything. Why why are you spending your emotional energy on that? He doesn't say it quite like that, but essentially what we're getting to, he's spot on. I can't change it. So why am I spending my emotional energy on something like I can't change? I should be spending my very precious emotional energy on something I can change. And it feels so easy to stay in that pointy finger reactive mode rather than changing the world for the better and using our resilience, our mindset, our ideas, our inspiration, our discomfort quotient, if you like, our ability to experience discomfort, channel that to something productive.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think in our culture too, there's an expectation to be super emotional and, choose a side and talk about it and obsess about it. That's something new. That wasn't always true in my personal lifetime. This has been a learning curve for me too. Just, the extremes of the unrest. And I think the way that it's blown up through social media as well. We need to maybe not normalize that. That's not normal to constantly be dysregulated all the time and distracted, and focused on things that are not productive, because your husband's right. I get riled up too over current events and everything. But I have to choose to, be productive, build something. When I feel at my worst, I build things, I create, I add on to, a thesis or something like that. That's so much more interesting. And I'm so much happier.
I love it. I love it so much. Well, let's move on to Quickfire Round, because otherwise we'll just talk about this all day. And this has been such a great conversation. So let's see what great pieces of advice you've got, or bad pieces of advice. Because my favorite question of every podcast is, what is the worst piece of advice you've ever been given?
Yeah. Yeah. That one, it's not a singular piece of advice, but any version, any flavor of be realistic. That's boring. That perspective was built by someone else. Why can't I build my own, view of what is or is not realistic? Why does that have to have been determined by someone else? That's sort of the creative part in me. I don't know if I mentioned too, I come from a family of artists, and I don't have an artistic bone in my body. So operating businesses and being an entrepreneur is really how I do that. But yeah, so be realistic. I don't like things like that, or follow, the safe and traditional route. It's just not for me. I'm happy that it works for other people, but it's never been for me.
Mm-hmm. You know what? It sits perfectly alongside that discomfort piece. Realistic is comfort, I think. So yeah, don't be realistic, ladies. Don't do that. I think it holds us back too much. I think that somebody will always point it out, the counterpoint out to you. You don't have to listen though. What is the best piece of advice?
Gosh, I haven't really received that much good advice, I think. And that's not a knock on anyone. I think a lot of my best advice comes through self-reflection and being self-aware. And again, thinking about my life critically at all times. And it's all about risk. And again, getting a comfort zone, again, sounds cliche, but really pushing myself out there, building confidence through action, putting myself in the driver's seat as well. We're always looking outward for advice and wisdom, and it's valuable, but we hold a lot of wisdom within as well. So yeah, I like to sort of think of myself as I try to be as sovereign as possible. I try to ensure that my thoughts are my thoughts. Be self-contained, be sort of your own center of gravity, I guess. Yeah.
Love that. Be your own center of gravity. I'm loving that phrase. I'm gonna have to put that on a pin board. What is the last book you read or listened to, and would you recommend it?
Yeah. So one thing that I'll share, my mom passed not too long ago, just months ago. So lot of what I've been reading, thank you, has been unpacking that and just grappling with it the way that I know how to. So I've recently read and took a course on somatic practices to sort of figure out trauma, not necessarily heal it, but tap into it in a different way. Because, talking, I can over intellectualize my own emotions a lot, but when I feel them and I tune into myself, that's different. So there's a book called Trauma and the Unbound Body. And the author's name escapes me, but it's been tremendously helpful. It's interesting when you're going through somatics, how subtle little thoughts and everything, and just tuning into yourself and feeling yourself in your body, how much is there that
Yeah.
you're just blind blind to, rather. So that's been a lot of fun. But I've also, I want to pick up reading some books by the Stoics too. That's something I've never done. So like Aurelius and everything like that. But yeah, I like reading business books as well. Yeah, I would recommend every book. I would say dive into a good book and see what you can get out of it. But yeah, Trauma and the Unbound Body is an excellent book. And if you can find a practitioner to sort of walk you through the practices, yeah, gosh, that's a life hack. My life has changed a lot since,
Wow.
yeah, kind of picking up some somatics.
Well, thank you. And I will make sure that we link that book in the show notes for anybody listening who is wanting to unpack anything like that in their lives. Please go check out the show notes and find that book. How can people find out more about you, Emily, what you do, what Numinous Capital? How can we find you online?
Yeah. So I have an online presence. So you can Google my name and find me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect with all of your listeners. I love connection requests with a little note if the spirit moves you, just so I have some context to the connection there, or visit my website, our website rather, numinouscap.com. We have a contact form, and my email address is there as well. But yeah, always happy to connect with awesome women and awesome people.
Mm-hmm. And I would definitely advocate for reaching out to Emily. I would say that Emily is somebody I would call a super connector, somebody who is just going to open doors if you know her. She has so much wisdom. So if you're thinking about anything we've talked about today, I would encourage you to reach out. Our networks are our biggest asset, in my opinion. So listeners, encourage you to reach out to Emily. Emily, this has been phenomenal. This has been such a great conversation. And as I said, I would love to have dived into so many more things here with you. So I'd love to ask you, what is the final thought you want to leave us with today?
Don't operate in fear. I think I think that's one thing we've all given ourselves a lot of leeway to do, especially in recent years. But choose to be courageous and take risks. There is nothing wrong with failing. And also I would say that you probably need less than you think you need. So if you're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, there are ways to do that safely, and there are ways to go all in on yourself. But focus on risk. Take some smart risks. This isn't partying every Saturday and doing risky behavior. This is, all right, I need to make a big quantum leap in my life, because I just I'm not feeling this. I'm bored, or just feel stagnant. Try something. Just try it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be afraid. Yeah,
I love
that's
it. I don't operate in fear is such a good way for us to wrap up this episode. I think that's so powerful. I think so many of us sit in fear, fear and discomfort without knowing why. And so we don't take action because we're in discomfort, rather than embracing the discomfort, taking action, and in my experience, winning because of the discomfort rather than sitting in it in a place of fear. Maybe that's the key to that. Getting comfortable with being uncomfortable is actually when we sit in the discomfort through fear, we don't make progress. Whereas when we embrace the discomfort, we let go of the fear, and we can make progress, and we can learn, and we can fail and learn as we fail. It's such a beautiful, beautiful way to wrap this up. So listeners, a few little quick tips for you. Get out there. First of all, that's the key thing I took away from the earlier piece on investment. Get out there. Have conversations, speak to people, understand if this is something that's going to make a difference. How is it going to make a difference? What is the business case for this? Where are you right now? Where are you going to go? And then look at your comfort levels. Are you getting out of comfort every single day? Are you stepping away from your traditional circumstances? Are you being realistic and therefore boring? I love that little one from Emily earlier. And then finally, step away from the fear. There's nothing wrong with failing. You can do this. It's just taking baby steps every single day.